Hello, everyone. I'm Jospa Petrinic, President and CEO of the Canadian Urban Transit Research and Innovation Consortium, welcoming you back to one of our marquee Fireside Chats for the Rail Conference this week. As you all know, rail's been in the news across Canada repetitively over the last 12 months. Really important aspect of our return to transit post-pandemic, but also a really important aspect for the economic growth of Canada going forward in climate action world. So I have with me here today Phil Verster, President and CEO of Metrolinx. Phil has been overseeing the expansion of rail and transit services across the Greater Toronto and Hamilton areas. And before he joined Metrolinx, as many of you know, he had extensive experience globally in the UK and Scotland and in other jurisdictions. So coming to Canada with a lot of international experience in a time and an era when rail is more important than ever for climate action, for return to transit post-pandemic, and frankly, for overcoming congestion in the Greater Toronto and Hamilton areas to improve our quality of life. We welcome Phil Verster here to the stage today. So Phil, I'm going to hand the virtual microphone over to you first so that we can get a bit of a sense of your reading of the landscape and the state of rail and rail expansion across Ontario and Canada. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Jospa. I think we are, after this unprecedented disruption that the pandemic brought to our communities, we are on the cusp of huge changes in how people look at their lives, how people look at their communities, how they travel, and how they do their day-to-day things differently. And we're starting to see that. And I think transit is going to be central to some of those choices people make. The huge impact that transit has on high density corridors, such as what we have here in the Greater Toronto and Hamilton area, as well as on large employment areas and nodes of large employment, is significant. And so our targeted programs to very carefully look at how do we build especially light rail transit solutions, LRT solutions, our subway programs, and then also our regional rail or GO expansion programs are all targeted to those high density, high employment corridors. And I think we will all have to think in a different definition, a different format about how transit works in Canada. Now is the time to innovate. And innovate does not necessarily mean just technology. We need to innovate across a large spectrum of choices we make. We need to innovate in terms of customer focus and bring a new type of performance to satisfy customer expectations, whether that is superb Wi-Fi systems on our transit solutions, or whether that's service adjustments we make to make sure we provide the right trains at the right time, connected to the right buses, connected to the right secondary transit, connected to the right last mile, first mile type solutions. We need to innovate in that space. We need to innovate commercially in terms of how we buy and build contracts. And we need to bring large parts of our supply chain with us. We also need to innovate in technology. What trains do we buy? How do we buy more autonomous trains? How do we buy a technology that's going to make our transit systems robust for the next couple of decades? And you know what, as an engineer, I have to say, we have to become more innovative in the engineering space around transit as well. How do we manage assets? How do we maintain them? And how do we ensure that we have a really good, safe, robust transit system in each of our jurisdictions for decades to come? It's an exciting time, Jospa.
Phil, those are great introductory comments and a natural segue into some of the core things that we're going to want to talk about today. Innovation is the key, but I think if you're Canadian in the innovation space, you know that the word is easy to say, it's really hard to do, as you're probably very well aware. And last year we were here talking about just how hard it is to introduce something that sounds as simple as low carbon hydrogen fuel, right? So really tough to do. If I can kind of roll back a little bit and go back just to the expansion issues, and then we're going to get into innovation in a moment. On the expansion of rail, as Canadians, we've been talking about getting more rail, more mass mobility for decades. And Metrolinx was working to expand its services across Ontario massively pre-pandemic. And then, of course, as you well know, there was this massive catastrophic drop-off in ridership in fundamental ways, and it's not clear whether people are going to come back naturally. Can you walk us through Metrolinx's expansion efforts right now and help our conference participants understand what's on track, what's been delayed and behind schedule because of the pandemic, and what kind of Metrolinx service can Ontarians expect by 2025, given the current rate of expansion and the current status of COVID-19?
Good news is that despite the pandemic, we put huge efforts into maintaining and speeding up our construction program over the last 2 or 3 years. And nothing has been delayed by the pandemic. To give you just a rough indicator, when I joined here 4 years ago, we were doing about $2.5 billion of capital investment. This year will be close to 6 billion, and that's per year. And in the next 2 years, we're ramping that up to 8 billion. Our Go expansion program closes, the bids for that closes the end of November. That's a 3-year procurement completed, one of the biggest procurements we've had, $12 billion. And that will transform our regional rail by a factor of 3 in terms of capacity. 2,000 trains per week goes up to 6,000 trains per week. Our USEP, Union Station Enhancement Project, is our first innovative alliance project, totally new way to procure transit projects. Fantastic project, and that is now at its stage where it's kicking off in its project phase. It's a fantastic project itself, and that'll transform Union Station Corridor. Our 2 advanced tunnel contracts on Eglinton Crosstown West and Scarborough extensions are in the ground. Our launch shafts are being built, being finalized. Tunnel boring machines getting delivered from December. First shipments from Herentnecht in Germany are leaving Europe in December, arriving here January, February, and we'll have these tunnel boring machines in the ground and starting in April, May of next year. Our LRT projects, we've got 3 exciting ones that are in flight. Eglinton Crosstown, it's been challenging, but what a fabulous project that is. And that project is going to complete next year. And we're already testing at grade level with trains and signaling systems and track and everything being proven. I was on one of those trains a couple of weeks ago, and it's fabulous to see. And our first train delivery on Finch West LRT has arrived. Our Ontario LRT is moving forward. We're going to kick off the 4th one, Hamilton LRT, imminently with, again, an innovative contractual model to deliver that. And what can I say, Giuseppe? These are game changers in terms of these communities, from the subway programs through to the LRT programs. Our crown jewel subway project, which is the Ontario line, we've broken into 3 different contracts. The first 2 of those are going to be bids received for those would be around April of next year. That is for the railway systems and operations and maintenance project is one half of those 2. And the other one is the South Civils project, which is the tunneling and stations that's getting built. And that will therefore pick up momentum as bids close in April and start to get, and will be launched next year. So all speed ahead, as they say. It's very humbling, to be honest, to be making such a huge transit contribution for us as Metrolinx. It's very humbling to make that at this point in time.
This is so critical. I agree with you. It's a game changer, and it's not theoretical or philosophical either. I think apart from the fact that we obviously need a lot more rail to hit our climate targets, if you go across the GTHA right now and you try to buy a 1-bedroom condo anywhere on any proposed LRT line or the Eglinton Crosstown or the Ontario line, they're all bought up. including the pre-builds 3 to 4 years in advance. Now, not great for the
Absolutely.
housing crisis, but pretty obvious investment potential, right? And it's indicating that where transit is where the money is going. That is a game changer.
Giuseppe, you're so right. One of the things that's always sort of nagged me a little bit is that we've got Niagara Falls right close to Toronto, and we don't have never have had a great service because we don't own the track all the way there. So one of the things I've focused on, and we've now done that, is to expand our services to Niagara Falls. And we started by increasing our services to Hamilton from 40 services a week to 250 services a week by some of the investments we did over there. And to your point, property prices along that corridor, just because the GO service is there, has gone up by between 12 and 15% and continues to increase. And it becomes, transit becomes the enabler because it brings a different set of choices. You see, this is it. Transit equates to economic growth and economic development. And what is economic development? It's people like you and I having different choices we can exercise in terms of how we work, where we work, how we play, where we play, and how we connect with other people in our community. It's fantastic.
I agree. And more than busing even, I mean, I would say the expansion of rail really creates it as a first choice option for the middle class, which is where you're going to get the bulge of the movement in the country. Now, I will say if we can head into the innovation debate, but having said that, I'm going to segue on something you said. I live and breathe Toronto. I love Toronto. I love the GTHA. I've lived and breathed the life there in the streets there for many years, and I still live there. But my sister and I, during the pandemic, were one of the Torontonians who bought a house outside in St. Catharines. I can't get from St. Catharines to downtown Toronto in less than a few hours when I try to do it by transit. And there isn't a great series of connections yet. And so getting out to that Niagara region is critical. And I remember one time I did get one of my colleagues, my friends at McKinsey, a partner at McKinsey, to get on the VIA train from downtown Toronto to Niagara. And he said, never again, because it was shaking, the track was all over the place. And he said, this was just not sufficient for people to identify as a go-to route. And he was right. At the end of the day, people in that income bracket need to believe that this is the fastest, most efficient way for them to get around. And I think you're on track to do that. So if we can then, Phil, turn to the segue of the innovation debate. Again, easier said than done. Expanding rail with known technology is great. But if we hear anything happening out of the Ottawa LRT, it's that a bit of innovation there has caused a lot of gray hairs growing and a lot of challenges about why the implementation of new tech in an area where maybe it hasn't been tested out before. So into the new innovation and technology, can you walk us through what is Metrolinx's commitment to new technology, specifically zero emissions transit technologies like hydrogen fuel cell technologies or battery electrification or autonomous rail, in particular with an eye to climate change, as well as the challenges of those alternative fuels?
Absolutely. Look, every train we run takes 900 cars off the road. And our expansion for the GO expansion project specifically, where we go from 2,000 trains a week to 6,000 trains a week, you can do the math. This brings the carbon footprint down as we go along. Critical for the GO expansion was to change the technology mode for traction, and we are going to an electric traction mode. And here's the rub of your question, which is so interesting. We pushed innovation in the hydrogen space by developing a prototype loco for a hydrogen application. And we put it out to the market, and we invited the supply chain to bid a hydrogen solution for us. And I can tell you, we did a lot to encourage that type of thinking within the marketplace. However, the market must decide. It must take on the commercial liability, and here's the rub of it. Innovation is sometimes thought of as just the technology aspect, the cool stuff, hydrogen fuel. Yep, I'm all up for it. But what I need to ensure is that taxpayers and communities have a product for the next 30 years, that loco needs to work for us, that works reliably, works at the right cost equation, and is a viable product. And I think that's the dimension which is sometimes not fully implemented at the initial stages of the technology wave. And we're now seeing organizations such as Canadian Pacific doing great work with the supply chain on hydrogen locos, and maybe the market has matured since then. But I know that for our Go expansion program, we'll probably get an overhead catenary system solution being bid for us, and that would be the solution that we would be implementing across our network. However, there's lots of opportunities to innovate. I mean, we've got 10 lead stations, 3 of them silver, 7 gold, and a further 15 lead stations, which is really projects that are coming on, which is really important. And we're converting our own bus fleet to a different traction mode as well, which will be which will test with the market what will be the technology of choice. But all of this moving towards transit that's in the green space.
Now that we've talked about hydrogen and some of those complexities, let's get a little bit more into the autonomous side of the equation. To what extent are autonomous rail systems going to help Metrolinx overcome some of the efficiency issues, not only of diesel propulsion, but in general of rail systems? And how much can autonomous rail systems also help with safety and reduced emissions over the next 10 years?
Yeah, so this is another space, very much a technology space that we are heavily invested in for the future. And that is more autonomous vehicles and autonomous rail systems, as well as higher automation from what's traditionally called the rail signaling system. And what technology brings us here are choices where we can increase firstly, the efficiency and effectiveness of how a transit system runs. And where we have subways, which is not really a network of rail operations and sort of an up and down railway, you can run an autonomous vehicle, rail vehicle significantly more effective and efficiently. It holds time better, it controls speed better, it navigates inclines and descents better, and it's just a better experience for the customer. And our Ontario line will be a self-driving autonomous vehicle. But, you know, often forget about what the enhancements in train signaling systems enable us to do. And I think it's worthwhile to just remark on that is on our Go expansion project, the changes we'll make to the signaling system will significantly increase our capacity through busy corridors, such as the Union Station Rail Corridor. But more than that, it'll have significant safety features in it, speed control at critical parts of the network, you know, protection at junctions, which is what we call junction control, where you're not dependent purely on the human interface to decide on what's a safe approach to a junction, but the signaling system would give that safety assurance as well. And I think this is essential. This is essential. We got to use technology innovatively to make sure that we get the most from it and the most efficiency for and effectiveness for our customers.
Thanks so much, Phil. So I'm going to go into now the future forward in terms of a futuristic reading. As I said in the intro comments, and you've already alluded to as well, rail isn't the primary mode of travel for Ontarians today, but it should be, certainly whether we want to achieve climate action or anti-congestion goals or whatnot, urban development, economic development. So how is it going to become the primary mode of mobility for Ontarians, or at least Southern Ontarians, by 2030? What is Metrolinx doing to entice that future to arrive sooner rather than later?
I think, Giuseppe, the core principle that makes transit feasible for the choice or makes it the preferred choice for a passenger is a very simple principle, is ease. I don't want to go on a website and look up a schedule. I don't want to struggle to get to the station. It should be really easy. I should have active travel bike path that gets me there. I should have an ability to take my bicycle on the train, or should have a nice bicycle rack that I can leave my bicycle safely, or I can walk easily. But mostly, I don't want to check a schedule. I want to arrive and I want to train and I want to just get on the train and go. That's the challenge. You know, when you live in a country as phenomenally big as Canada, it's huge cost to provide high frequency service across such a significant geography, and I think that's the challenge. And so when you look at our Go expansion program, that aims to do exactly that, higher frequency on our corridors. And if you think of our expansion in the next 20 years in the GTHA, will grow by another 30–40% of people. We have 145,000 people that join the GTHA every year. And as people join, the larger footprint of the subways we're building and the LRTs we're building will therefore create at least proximity for people to high frequency transit services. And then we'll provide high frequency with the investments we're making. And that is the rub. That's the central rub of transit, and the equation that you either, you cannot do this without frequency. So you have to get frequency. Frequency means you have to have capacity. So you have to build the capacity. And then you have to have the footprint, which is where the subways, LRTs, and Go expansion become a network. And I think for me, the passion here is to create a network of services. And when you look at our Ontario line, when you look at what we do with Eglinton and Crosstown and Eglinton Crosstown West and Scarborough, everywhere we are making sure that modes are interfacing to modes, whether it's a subway to Go, whether it's a subway to an LRT, whether it's a Go to an LRT. And then obviously to all of the bus services in the region. It's an exciting time.
It is. And, you know, I don't like drawing comparisons to Europe, and people often say we need rail like in Europe, but we don't have the population and the density and the urban geography of Europe. So it's not really a fair comparison. But going against my best indications to myself, I'm going to give a comparison. When I used to live in, I used to do my PhD in Edinburgh. So my PhD was in the University of Edinburgh, but I lived in Glasgow, and I was able to run to the train station, usually late, run onto the train, not swipe my pass or whatnot, get on the train knowing that, okay, I'll have to pay a little bit more because I didn't swipe my pass. But I knew that if I missed the train, even if the train was late, there was another train just around the corner, another 10 minutes or 12 minutes or 15 minutes later. So I knew I could get to class on time. And I think in the Canadian context, you know, we often hear at QTRIC, on-time service is so key, but actually it's frequency, because even if the train is, but it's frequency.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
On-time performance is crucial because that's customer satisfaction. But in order to attract customers and get your customer base to follow, you have to have frequency capacity. I'll give you an example. Between 2017 and the beginning of the pandemic, we increased our capacity, meaning the number of trains we run on Go, by 44%. And we made a deliberate push to increase the capacity. Before we did that in previous years, ridership grew by about 0.5% to 1%. When we increased our capacity, increased the frequency of trains, ridership increased by 7 to 8% per year. And it's just that's the formula for transit.
Yeah, I believe it. I believe it because people can plan their lives around that. And so maybe we'll head to our final question, given the time we have, which is honing in on that post-pandemic recovery. More trains, more track, more frequency. These are all critical to attracting ridership over the long term, regardless of pandemic. But the pandemic has potentially changed the DNA of ridership. Hopefully not. I don't believe so. But there's a lot of advocates that would say it's fundamentally transformed people's fear of transit. So what are the aspects of a return to transit effort that Metrolinx is taking that's pandemic specific to get people back on trains feeling safe and secure, high air filtration, clean copper rails, whatever it is that you're doing to message to people that this is probably one of the safest places you can be to not get infected, and it's probably one of the safest ways to travel to work?
I think there are two dimensions to that question, and I'll do the first one, which you so eloquently point out. Safety and health, my health as a commuter, non-negotiable, and therefore you as a transit operator, you gotta make me feel that it's non-negotiable and that you are totally ensuring my safety. And And all of us are doing that. I know Rick and his team at TTC is doing it, we're doing it, and throughout the region, everyone's doing that. I mean, we've got plexiglass separation between seats, which was a massive investment, but our customers are very, very excited about that and very pleased, and all of the commentary are very supportive of things like that. We've implemented 40 different measures: regular cleaning, hand sanitizer at every doorway, whether it's bus or train, stuff like that. But this is table stakes, and so all of us are treating that as table stakes. The more interesting dimension to your question is what does transit flows and transit patterns and transit choices look like going forward? And clearly, there's even Metrolinx. We've got a shift now towards more work from home post the pandemic, because that's a shift in our communities that we've all noticed. But we are also, and as you can imagine, our regional rail will therefore be affected, because people that used to travel in on a daily commute, morning in, evening out, that's going to be very different. So what do we expect to happen? Well, instead of traveling morning in and evening out as a commuter, we now expect that the Giuseppas and the Phils of the world will be traveling in at, say, 9, 10 o'clock for a meeting at 11, which would last an hour and a half. And then they may travel to another meeting, perhaps in Pickering, before going home in Oshawa. So the whole concept of morning intensity and evening intensity services is going to be replaced by high frequency, regular, all-day travel, which is exactly what the Go expansion business model is. But having ideas now is okay. But what we are focusing at Metrolinx now is just listen, just listen and look. And we do significant scans of our ridership to just listen to what they need. And you know what, Giuseppe, one of the areas that recovered most and quickest of our services has been weekend services. People have an urge to get out, excursions, regional events, 7 biggest sort of parks that we've got in the region. We've had a marketing campaign around get to these 7 great parks just for a day out with the family. And our ridership for the weekend events has skyrocketed, where the weekday ridership, classic work ridership, has been very much linked to schools reopening and businesses reopening. So the way for the next couple of years is listen, excel at customer service and excel at listening to your customers.
So it sounds like, Phil, really looking at new markets, right? Whether that's the family package on the weekend or the demand pricing for the Phils
Absolutely
and the
right.
that are different times. I think that's right. I think there are loads of untapped markets for rail ridership and transit ridership, frankly, across the GTHA. And I think the pandemic has opened up the opportunity for on-demand pricing, loads of new innovative ways to bring ridership in. Now, I know you can't say it, so I'm going to say it. We've long been a proponent, and Cushrick has been, of road pricing. And I think that is one place in the future for climate action that drives new ridership. But whatever it is, I think, folks, you've heard from Phil Verster here today. There's a lot of expansion, a lot of opportunity, a lot of new market orientation within the rail network in the community. And it's not the old rail of the 1990s and the 2010s even. This is a new type of rail for the Greater Toronto and Hamilton areas that I truly believe, Phil, and I hope you agree, and I'm pretty sure you will agree, will transform Canada's mobility landscape. So I want to thank you, Phil.
Absolutely.
And ask you if there's anything last you want to leave our audience members with.
No, I think we covered a lot of ground. I think transit is in a hugely exciting phase now. It gives us all an opportunity to rethink what formulas we use to make this fantastic contribution to our communities and to our economies. And I encourage everyone, and I'm very humble towards everyone that contributes to Metrolinx's efforts, and I encourage everyone to work closely with us and with one another to take transit forward in the next couple of years.
Thank you, Phil, for your leadership and for continuing the investment. I mean, Ontario needs it, Canada needs it, and certainly Torontonians like me who want to get to St. Catharines and back, lickety split, need it too. So thank you again, Phil, for your time. And that is Phil Verster, CEO of Metrolinx. Many of you have had the opportunity to hear him previously. We still have his recording from last year as well. If you want to listen to that online, you can hear what the differences have been in the last year. But it sounds like a lot of robust investment going forward, and the pandemic has not derailed the entire paradigm. Thank you again, Phil, for your time.